Mira had never planned to be in the forest that late. She was the kind of person who double-checked maps, kept her phone charged, and told someone where she was going. But life had been heavy for months, and when her cousin invited her to a quiet weekend near the hills, she said yes without thinking too much. It sounded simple. Fresh air. A short hike. A reset. The first part of the hike really was simple. The trail was wide and soft underfoot. Sunlight moved between tall trees like slow waves. Birds called from branches so high Mira could not see them. She walked behind her cousin, Rafi, and his friend, Ben, for a while. They joked and talked about food and old stories. Mira smiled when she needed to. She tried to let the noise in her mind fade. Then Rafi got a call. He stepped aside, speaking in a low voice. Ben checked something on his phone and frowned. "Signal is weak," Ben said. Rafi returned, looking annoyed. "We need to go back soon." Something came up. Mira did not argue. She just nodded. They turned around and started back. That was when the small choices began. The kind people make without noticing. A step to the left to avoid mud. A pause to look at a strange leaf. A moment where Mira slowed down because she thought she heard running water. And then, without meaning to, she was no longer hearing their voices. "Rafi," she called softly. No answer. She stopped walking. The forest seemed to notice, like it was holding its breath. The air felt cooler. The light between the trees looked different than before, dimmer and more gray. Mira turned in a slow circle. Trees everywhere. The trail that had been clear felt less certain now, like a thought fading before you finish it. "Rafi," she called louder. Still nothing. Her heart began to beat faster. She tried to breathe through it. Don't panic. First rule was always the same. Stop. Think. Look. She pulled out her phone. One bar, then none. She lifted it higher like that would help. Nothing. Mira swallowed and forced herself to stay calm. She remembered hearing that if you are lost, you should not keep walking without a plan. But standing still felt worse. Standing still felt like giving up. She chose a direction that looked like it might lead downhill. Downhill often meant water. Water often meant people, roads, or at least a place to rest. The forest changed as she went deeper. The trees grew thicker, their trunks darker. The air carried a faint smell of wet bark. The sound of birds became distant. Her boots sank into soft earth. Time stretched in a strange way. Mira did not know if she had been walking 20 minutes or an hour. She tried calling again, but her voice sounded small, swallowed by leaves and distance. A thought came, sharp and cold. What if they went back without her? She pushed it away. Rafi would not do that. He would search. They would find her soon. But as the light began to shift toward evening, fear started to feel less like a thought and more like a physical thing sitting in her chest. Mira kept walking, telling herself she would stop soon, find a safe spot, and wait. That was the smart choice. But she could not stop. Every time she slowed down, the silence pressed closer. Then she saw it. At first it looked like a shadow that did not match the trees. Something with straight lines, not natural. Mira blinked and took a few careful steps forward. It was wood. Old wood. Half hidden behind bushes and vines was the shape of a wagon, but not like the small wagons people use for gardens. This was big. Almost like a cabin built on wheels. The wheels were enormous, thick and cracked with age. The roof was curved, covered in moss. The sides were made of wooden panels, gray from time and weather. Mira stared, frozen. A wagon cabin. In the middle of nowhere. It felt impossible, like the forest had kept a secret for too long and now it was letting her see it by accident. She walked closer. Her fear mixed with curiosity, the way darkness makes a candle look brighter. The cabin had a small door on the side. A narrow window above it, cloudy with dirt. The door was closed, but not locked. The handle was a simple metal loop, rusted and stained. Mira hesitated. Every warning she had ever heard rose in her mind. Don't go into strange places alone. Don't touch things you don't understand. But she was lost. Night was coming. This wagon cabin, strange as it was, could be shelter. She placed her hand on the metal loop. It was cold. She pulled gently. The door creaked, as if it had been waiting for someone to try. A smell rolled out, old and dry, like dust and forgotten paper. Mira stepped back for a second, then leaned forward and pushed the door wider. Inside, it was darker than she expected. The light from outside barely reached the back. She lifted her phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness in a thin line. The inside was small but carefully built. A narrow bed against one wall. A tiny table that folded down. Shelves with jars lined up in rows. Everything was covered in dust, but it did not look broken. It looked preserved. Like someone had left and expected to return. Mira stepped inside. The floorboards creaked under her weight, but they held. The air was cooler in here, almost steady, like the cabin kept the forest out. She turned slowly, shining the light around. On the shelf near the bed sat a small tin box. It was sealed, but not rusted through. Next to it was a leather bag, stiff with age. On the table was a candle, still standing straight in a holder. Mira's stomach tightened. The place felt too untouched, too still. She moved closer to the table. The beam of her flashlight caught something carved into the wood. Letters. She brushed dust away with her fingers. Wait for me. Mira's throat went dry. Wait for me was not a decoration. It was a message. She looked again, carefully. Under it, a date had been carved. The numbers were faint, but clear enough. It was from more than 100 years ago. Mira stepped back, her heart thudding again. Her mind tried to make sense of it. Who lived here? Why was it hidden? Why did it look like time had stopped the moment the door closed? She told herself to stay calm. She needed shelter, not mystery. She could rest here, then leave when it was light. But her eyes kept pulling toward the tin box. Something about it felt important. Like it was not just an object. Like it had weight beyond metal. Mira reached out, then paused. Her hand hovered over the lid. She listened. The forest outside was quiet. Too quiet. Even the wind felt softer. She pulled her hand back. She should not touch it. Not yet. She should check if someone was nearby. She should call out again. She stepped out of the cabin and raised her voice. Hello, is anyone here? Her words fell into the trees and disappeared. No answer. No movement. Only the slow, thick quiet of the forest. Mira went back inside and shut the door most of the way, leaving a small gap for air. The cabin felt safer closed, even though the silence inside was heavy. She sat on the edge of the narrow bed. Dust rose in a small cloud. She covered her mouth and coughed softly. Her legs ached. Her hands shook, not from cold but from the long tension. She tried her phone again. Nothing. Mira pressed her palms together and forced herself to think like a person who wanted to survive, not a person trapped in a strange story. Okay. Shelter. Good. Next. Rest. Save battery. Don't panic. She turned off the flashlight. The cabin became dark again, but not fully. A thin line of fading daylight came through the cloudy window. In that dim light, her eyes kept drifting back to the tin box. It seemed to pull at her attention like a quiet voice. Mira stood up again. Her fear and curiosity were fighting, and curiosity was starting to win. She turned the flashlight back on and walked to the shelf. The tin box sat there, dusty, silent, patient. She touched it with 2 fingers. It was colder than it should have been. Mira lifted it carefully. It was heavier than it looked. There was a latch on the front. It was not locked. Just closed. Her breath became shallow. She thought again about the carved words. Wait for me. Was it a promise? A warning? A plea? Myra's hands trembled as she brought the box down to the table. She did not open it yet. She just stared at it like it might move on its own. Then she noticed something else. On the inside wall near the door, partly covered by a hanging cloth, was a set of markings. Myra pulled the cloth aside. Someone had drawn lines on the wood. Tallies. Dozens of them. Maybe hundreds. And beside the tallies, written in faded ink, were words that made Myra feel cold from the inside. He will come when the forest goes quiet. Myra's mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. The forest goes quiet. Outside, it was quiet. Too quiet. She slowly turned her head toward the door. The gap she had left was still there, a thin black line of night starting to form beyond it. Myra reached for the handle to close it fully, and that was when she heard it. A sound. Not an animal. Not wind. A slow creak. Like wood under weight. Like a step on an old floorboard. But the sound came from outside. Right beside the wagon cabin. Myra froze, her hand still on the handle. Then another creak. Closer. And another. Myra's heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her throat. Her mind screamed to move, to run, to hide, to do anything. But her body stayed still, as if fear had turned her into stone. A shadow moved across the thin gap in the door. Someone was standing outside. Myra squeezed her eyes shut for 1 second, then opened them again. She did not want to look, but she forced herself. The shadow did not leave. It stayed. Then a voice came, low and rough, like it had not been used in a long time. Finally! Myra's breath caught. The door handle began to turn from the outside, slow and careful, like whoever was there knew exactly what they were doing. Myra backed away, step by step, until her back touched the far wall. Her eyes flicked to the tin box on the table. A wild thought hit her. What if it was meant for this moment? What if it was the reason this cabin had been waiting for 100 years? The door creaked as it started to open. Myra reached for the tin box with shaking hands. And the moment her fingers touched the latch, the cabin light seemed to shift, as if the air itself tightened around her. The door opened wider. A cold breath of night slid inside. Myra swallowed hard and lifted the latch. The tin box clicked open. And inside, something wrapped in old cloth waited, perfectly protected, like it had been sleeping for a century. Myra's eyes widened. Because she recognized what it was, even before she fully uncovered it. And outside the cabin, the figure leaned closer, breathing slow, as if it had been waiting for her to do exactly this. Myra pulled the cloth back. And the thing inside made her whisper one word, trembling. No. She clutched it to her chest as the door creaked again. The figure stepped inside. And the forest, beyond the cabin, went completely silent. Myra's hands shook as she held the object from the tin box close to her chest. The cloth had fallen away enough for her to see it clearly. It was a small wooden journal wrapped in oil-soaked fabric. The cover was dark and smooth from age. A simple symbol was carved into it, a circle crossed by a single line. The figure at the door stepped fully inside the wagon cabin. He was tall but bent forward, as if the ceiling was lower than it truly was. His clothes looked old-fashioned, heavy fabric worn thin by time. His face was partly hidden under the shadow of a wide hat, but his eyes caught the faint light, and they looked sharp and aware. He closed the door behind him slowly. The sound echoed through the small space. Myra's breath felt trapped in her chest. "You found it," the man said quietly. His voice sounded dry like leaves rubbed together. Myra backed away until the bed pressed against her legs. She wanted to scream, but no sound came. Her mind raced, trying to understand what stood in front of her. "Who are you?" she finally managed to say. The man tilted his head. "I am the one who waited." Her grip tightened around the journal. Every part of her told her this was not a normal stranger. There was something wrong about how calm he looked, about how the air felt heavier now that he was inside. "What is this place?" Myra asked. Her voice trembled despite her effort to stay steady. The man looked around the cabin with something close to affection. "This was my home once," he said, "before the forest claimed it." Mira glanced at the tallies on the wall again. So many days, she whispered. The man followed her gaze and nodded slowly. I counted every one. A chill ran through her. You have been here for 100 years, she said. He smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. Time does not move the same for those who make promises in the forest. Mira swallowed. What promise? The man took a step closer. She raised the journal, without thinking, holding it between them. Stay back, she said. His eyes flicked to the journal and his expression changed, not anger, not fear, but something like hunger. That belongs to me, he said. It belongs to whoever wrote it, Mira replied, her courage surprised even her. The man let out a slow breath. I wrote it. Myra's heart pounded. Then why was it hidden? Because I knew one day someone like you would come. The words made her skin prickle. Someone like me. Lost, he said softly, alone. Mira felt exposed, as if he could see straight through her. She shook her head. I didn't choose this. No one ever does, he replied. He reached out a hand slowly. Give it to me, and you can leave safely. Mira hesitated. The offer sounded too easy, too practiced. What happens if I don't? She asked. The man's hand stopped in the air, his voice lowered. Then the forest keeps what it was given. The silence pressed in again. Mira remembered the words on the wall. He will come when the forest goes quiet. She took a deep breath. If you wrote it, then you know what is inside. The man's eyes darkened. Yes. Then you know why I can't give it back. For the first time his calm cracked. You do not understand what you are holding. Mira shook her head. I understand enough. She glanced down at the journal. When she had touched it earlier, something strange had happened. A warmth had spread through her hands, like the wood remembered her. I felt it, she said quietly. This thing isn't just yours anymore. The man stepped back suddenly, as if struck. You felt the bond, he said. What bond? The journal chooses. Mira stared at him. You mean it waits? Yes, he said. It waits for someone who can carry the weight of what is written inside. Her stomach tightened. What is written inside? The man looked at the door, then back at her. The truth of what this forest takes from people. Myra's thoughts flashed to her own life, the grief she had been carrying. The emptiness that brought her here. She wondered how much the forest knew. Open it, the man said. His voice held a strange mix of hope and fear. Mira hesitated only a moment before opening the journal. The pages were thick, and yellowed handwritten words filled them line after line. As she read the first page, her breath caught. The writing was clear and careful. It told the story of a young man who had entered the forest with his family. They had been traveling west seeking a new life. They built the wagon cabin to survive the winter, but one by one the forest took them. Illness, accidents, silence. The man behind her whispered, I promised I would stay until they returned. Mira turned to look at him. You waited for them. Yes, he said. I believed the forest would give them back if I did not leave. Her chest ached, and it didn't. No. Mira kept reading. The journal described how the forest began to change, how paths shifted, how time stretched, how the man stopped aging while the world outside moved on. You became part of it, Mira said. The man nodded slowly. The forest kept me as payment for the promise I made. Mira closed the journal gently. You are trapped. Yes. She looked at him with a mix of fear and pity. Then why do you want this back? The man's eyes hardened. Because if you leave with it, the forest will release me. Myra's heart skipped. And what happens to me? He did not answer right away. That depends on what you choose. The meaning was clear. If she took the journal and left, the forest would take her place. Mira stepped back. No, she said firmly. I won't trade my life for yours. The man's face twisted with anger. You already belong to this story. I don't, she said. I didn't make a promise. The cabin seemed to creak, as if listening. The walls groaned softly. You touched the journal, he said. You felt the bond. Mira shook her head. That doesn't mean I'm trapped. The man laughed softly. It always begins that way. Myra's fear flared again. She looked around for an escape. The window was small. The door was blocked by him. She clutched the journal tighter. What if there's another way? She asked. The man's laughter stopped. There is no other way. Mira thought of the tallies again, all those days, all that waiting. You waited for 100 years, she said. What if the promise was wrong? The man stared at her. What do you mean? What if the forest never planned to give them back? She continued. What if the promise only chained you here? His expression flickered. No. What if letting go is the only way? The words hung between them. The forest outside groaned as wind moved through the trees. The man's voice shook. If I let go, then everything I endured means nothing. Mira stepped closer despite her fear. It means you loved them, she said. It means you tried. His shoulders sagged slightly. I cannot leave without payment. Mira looked down at the journal again. What if the journal stays but the promise ends? The man frowned. That has never happened. Because no one tried. Mira walked to the table and placed the journal back where she found it. She did it slowly, deliberately. The cabin seemed to breathe. The air shifted. The man watched in shock. What are you doing? I am returning the story to the forest, she said. But I am not taking your place. The forest outside rustled louder. The silence cracked. The tallies on the wall began to fade. One by one they disappeared. The man gasped. His body flickered like smoke in sunlight. No, he whispered. Mira backed away. I release you from the promise, she said. You waited long enough. The journal glowed faintly. The carved symbol shimmered. The man fell to his knees, his form growing lighter, younger. I feel it, he said in awe. The weight is lifting. The door burst open as wind rushed through the cabin. Leaves and dust swirled around them. Mira shielded her face. The forest roared like it was waking from a long sleep. When the wind died down, the cabin was quiet again. The man was gone. In his place lay a simple scarf folded neatly on the floor. Mira stood frozen, breathing hard, her heart hammered with disbelief. Then she heard voices outside. Mira. She rushed to the door. Rafi and Ben ran toward her, their faces pale with worry. There you are, Rafi said, gripping her shoulders. We've been looking everywhere. Mira turned back toward the cabin, but it was gone. Only trees stood where it once had been. No wagon, no wheels, no door. She opened her mouth to explain, but the words felt impossible. Rafi pulled her into a hug. You're safe now, he said. Mira nodded slowly. Her eyes drifted to her hand. She was still holding the scarf. The forest whispered softly around them as if it remembered her. Mira did not speak about the forest on the way back. Rafi and Ben talked enough for all three of them. They laughed nervously, replayed the moment they realized she was missing, and argued about which turn they should never have taken. Mira listened, nodded, and held the scarf tightly in her pocket. The fabric felt warm, like it remembered the hands that once folded it. Back at the small cabin they were staying in, the night passed without sleep. Every time Mira closed her eyes, she saw the wagon cabin again. She heard the wind rushing through the door. She felt the weight of the journal in her hands. Near dawn, she finally sat up and looked at the scarf again. It was simple, woven from thick thread, faded but clean. When she touched it, a calm spread through her chest, slow and steady. Not fear, not excitement, just quiet understanding. When they returned home, life tried to move forward as if nothing had happened. Rafi went back to work. Ben posted pictures from the trip, joking about how they all needed better maps. Friends laughed when Mira said she got lost for a bit. Mira laughed too, when she had to. But some nights, she dreamed of tall trees and paths that shifted when no one was looking. She dreamed of promises made with hope and fear mixed together. A week later, she decided to look for answers. Mira visited the town library near the hills where they had stayed. It was small, quiet, and smelled of old paper. She did not know exactly what she was searching for, only that she would recognize it when she saw it. After hours of reading faded newspapers and local records, she found a short article, almost forgotten. It spoke of a traveling family who vanished while moving west more than 100 years ago. Their wagon was last seen near the edge of a deep forest. Searches found nothing, no bodies, no wagon. Only rumors of a cabin that appeared and disappeared. Mira closed the book slowly. Her hands were steady. Her heart was calm. That night, she folded the scarf and placed it in a wooden box at home. She did not hide it. She did not display it. She treated it with respect. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. Mira noticed changes in herself. She felt less heavy. The sadness that once followed her everywhere no longer owned her. She still felt loss, but it did not control her steps. Sometimes, when she walked in parks or near trees, she felt watched. Not in a frightening way. More like being recognized. Once, during a quiet walk, she heard a soft rustle beside her. When she turned, no one was there. But the air felt warm, grateful. Mira smiled and continued walking. She understood now. Some places remember people. Some promises must be released, not fulfilled. And some stories wait for the right person to listen, not to stay. The forest had taken much. But that day, it had given something back. Not a reward. Not a burden. A reminder. Life moves forward when you let go. And far away, deep within the forest, the paths shifted once more. But this time, they opened.